Referencing. You pick yourself some tracks that sound like your track, and you adjust your mix and master to them. It sounds so obvious, but I feel like it's often overlooked. So today I want to look at the tools that you need to do it and what you gotta pay attention to. So here's an old master of my track Umta. And here's the final released version. Yeah, it sounds nicer because it's a bit louder, but what we want to do when we're referencing is adjust all volumes so that the perceived loudness is the same. We'll come across many different tonal balances, meaning different amounts of highs, mids, and lows. So you can measure that with a loudness meter like the Julian one, but I do it by ear. So let me adjust that. So now these have the same perceived loudness. So there's a high chance you're watching this on a mobile phone. If you are, then you're probably not going to hear the differences without putting on headphones. But you can tell I reduced the sub amount and there's more mids. Yeah, what you can see here is span, by the way. It's a free spectrum analyzer and it comes with these functions here, which are very important actually. This one, for instance, is the average time it takes for the signal to be reflected here. It's usually at a higher rate, like 1 second around. But especially this song, it has a lot of quiet spaces. So the more spaces in between and the more dynamic the song has, the more the image will be compromised by that. And I want to avoid that. So if we have the same song with the same loudness on and off and on and off, and then on another song, it's like constantly on, then those would be perceived the same loudness. And yeah, the spectrum analyzer would display them differently. So I'm picking a shorter time here, like around 300 milliseconds. And then what's important is the slope. So because we need to understand each other, our ears are more sensitive to Highend, and that is applied to how these spectrum analyzers work with a tilt factor, if that's the right word. But there are different standards here. So if you pick 3, from what I know, it's adjusted most to how hearing works. So you can aim for like a straight line from left to right and your mix will sound fine, with an exception of the low end. So in bass music, the sub amount is just way higher. Doesn't matter as much as the rest of the spectrum, I'd say. And then, yeah, the rest should kind of aim for a line here. Then there's this kind of a dip around 200 hertz. Some songs have it, some don't. And then we have a smooth setting here. So when it's turned off, you get all these peaks. And that makes it harder to compare songs that have like very high peaks in the middle. And yeah, I just discovered this today. You may adjust that to your taste. I don't know, something like this. Now let's take a look at these songs. So my top reference for the first drop here was Boss Fight After Party by Virtual Riot. And yeah, you can clearly see that line here. We have a sub with more harmonics than mine. My harmonics are pretty much going under. Yeah, the next reference is Winged Data Stream. Also, your references don't have to fit your track perfectly. The more, the better. And then you can find out in the process which ones are the ones that are most important and which aren't. But here you can see this dip around like 250 hertz. It's really, really big. This reference... Oh yeah, what's the second drop of this song? Yeah, it doesn't fit too well. I don't know. This has a little more 4K. All right, so what I learned from that is maybe get it a little bit more mids, maybe give my sub a little bit more harmonics and decrease the amount of the sub. And yeah, more high end as well. And that's what I did here. All right, these differences are rather minimal in the first drop, but in the second drop I did a lot. So let me take a look through the references first. We have this Virtual Riot track that has a lot of sub. Again, it varies strongly and not too much high-end actually. Then this, which turned out to be my best reference, I'd say, has much more of a line, more high-end and way less sub. So let me compare those two. So Sleepless by Pixel Terror, Chime and Timonite is much brighter. And some say we are turning from a loudness war into a brightness war in dubstep right now. So that may or may not be a bad thing. What do we got here? So all kinds of supersaw drops. Crank Dead has more mids, a lot. Like around here. Then there's this thing from Xylem called Human Error. which has a huge dip in the entire midsection and then lots and lots of high end. Like if that one sounds clearest to you and you like that a lot, then that's good. But yeah, it wasn't my best reference. We have a Barely Alive track. Again, with fewer high end. And you can also see the more you get to the high end, the more interesting the details can be. So in the lows, you either have sub or you don't have sub. And in the high end, there's like so much space to put ear candy in. Yeah, on Barely Alive tracks, you can mostly see like a very flat noise wall in the very highest treble, but that still kind of sounds clean. So it's not a bad thing. So this is like a major difference between Barely Alive and Wink, for example, because on Wink, we got more of these very thin but high resonances, like those. I kind of have those too in my track. Yeah. But I feel like I tamed them a bit to make it more aligned with the feel of all references. And like with the second drop, these drops are very different from each other. So yeah, I think it requires more adjustments, more compromising towards a balanced mix and master. These two are fairly similar, but I feel like Virtual Riot Dreaming has less going on in the synths and basses and leaves more room for the cymbals, which are then still not very loud. We have this Electric Lady, a little more high end, more mids than Sleepless. Now back to my song. This one felt quite boomy. I had the stereo going on because I felt like, why not? In the bass area. And I got rid of that because there's just no other song that did this. And what I got from most of these songs is that their high end is more compressed. So there's less of a difference between the loudest and the quietest parts. If you're having a hard time comparing the three band sections, you can just use a frequency splitter and solo the highs. So you can clearly hear how there was lots of small peaks, like, and now we have like a strong and full feeling in the high end because I gave the synths a bit of high end back and compressed them all together a bit in the end. Yeah, especially Crank That does that a lot, I feel like compressing the high end. Like it doesn't go above a certain level, but you still can clearly hear the cymbals, so everything else must be ducking down. Yeah, like the sidechain is pretty strong. Short but strong. Somehow you gotta find a way in between, like which tonal balance do I choose? How bright do I want to make my track in general? So especially with the Chime album happening, I think he proves that you don't have to crank your sub up that much. And the less low end you have on a track, the easier it will be to master very loud without any clipping happening. Because again, our ears are most sensible to high end, so low end will have the biggest impact on how high the amplitude of the waveform will be. And yeah, the lower the sub goes, the more this shows. I think I'm most impressed by Virtual Riot's track Dreaming, just because of how much sub there is and like no distortion whatsoever. It just sounds really clean, really loud. To wrap this up, my changes in the drop were, of course, give it more high end, give it less dynamics in the high end. I think I made the sub a bit more consistent because there's like multiple basses going on. We have this like whoop, 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 whoop. And on the saw steps, there is a different sub. When you have like these high dynamic things happening, it might sense to take a look at it very fast. So what you might want to do is shorten the time window of the analyzer here. And then you can see everything will peak higher, of course, because it takes it less time to get up. And you can see, yeah, how it's more consistent, how there's it's peaking around here all the time. And in the old one, we are like from here to here. Yeah, this one's kind of going crazy too. Yeah, I took that down a lot too. So the easiest way to achieve what you want to achieve with referencing is to switch between your track and another track and like don't have this feeling, oh, this feels completely differently balanced. It kind of feels like the same, just yeah, different sounds. So So yeah, I think I achieved that pretty well with this track. If I would correct it now, I think I would give it a little less presence, like around the 4K area. It feels like shh, shh. Especially with this crash in the beginning. Shh. Yeah, I think that's everything about referencing you need to know. So you can start to have your existential crisis over all your past masters right now. Bye-bye. In some songs, some songs